Hello and welcome to today's webinar, the 2026 Recalibration, How High Growth Firms Outpace the Market. My name is Austin McNair. I'm the head of marketing here at Hinge, and I will be your webinar moderator today. Today's webinar is being presented by our team here at Hinge and our Hinge Research Institute. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Hinge, we are the leading research-based branding, marketing, and website design agency for professional services firms. So if your team is looking for a strategic partner who understands what drives growth for your professional services firm, then we encourage you to reach out to us. Visit our website, hingemarketing.com. There you can learn about which industries we serve, what kind of services we provide. And if you're interested, reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you. Everyone at Hinge today is excited because it is the first time today that we'll be discussing the results of our recently released 2026 high growth study. One thing you should know going into this presentation is that you will receive a recording of today's presentation in your inbox 24 hours later. So use this time. Don't worry about taking too many notes. Use this time to engage directly with our experts, Liz and Karl. Ask them your questions. You can use the Q&A feature throughout today's presentation to submit your comments and questions. And then also keep an eye out on the chat. I'm going to be sending some links there to you. One of those is the link directly to our high growth study executive summary. It's the focus of our presentation today. You're going to want to download that if you haven't already done so. But let me go back here and let's introduce today's presenters. Today, we are joined by Liz Haar and Karl Feldman. First, Liz Haar, an accomplished entrepreneur and executive specializing in branding and growth strategies for professional services firms. Managing partner and author of Hinge's weekly newsletter, Pivot, Liz also leads Hinge's client delivery team, helping businesses solve critical marketing and brand-related challenges. Prior to joining Hinge, Liz co-founded a tech company and grew it to a thriving organization that became known for its expertise in CRM platforms. A sought-out speaker in professional services circles, Liz has co-authored several books and reports published by the Hinge Research Institute and regularly contributes to Hinge's blog and numerous other professional services publications. Welcome to the webinar, Liz.
Thank you, Austin.
And next, we are joined by Hinge's managing partner, Karl Feldman, a career entrepreneur, marketer, consultant. Karl is uniquely qualified to lead Hinge's research and technology teams. Karl also leads our AEC practice, where he guides Hinge's architecture, engineering, and construction clients through the complexities of modern marketing. From research and strategy to content, marketing, brand building, and high-performance website development. And if that wasn't enough, Karl regularly writes in top industry publications and speaks about professional services marketing and strategy at events around the nation. Welcome to the webinar, Karl.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we have so much to get through today. And it's all going to center around Hinge's high growth study. And I'm curious, I want to know from the audience, before we get going in today's presentation, have you gone and taken the step yet to download this executive summary? I'm going to launch a quick poll here. And we want to know, have you already seen this data? Or is this going to be the first time on the call that you're hearing about these insights? This is the 11th consecutive year that Hinge has published this research reports. This year, we surveyed 495, almost 500 different firms that participated from a variety of industry groups, and they represent over $84.8 billion in combined revenue. So this year's sample size was excellent. We had some amazing people participate, amazing marketing leaders participate on behalf of their firms. And if you're on the call today and you did participate, let us just say from the jump here, thank you for your participation. It means a lot. It goes a long way to us being able to share these valuable insights with everybody today. So I'll go ahead and end the poll. It looks like the majority of people, Liz and Karl, still have not downloaded the executive summary. So I've put the link in the chat. You guys can go to that. It's hingemarketing.com/high growth. It's easy to find. If you have any questions, you can always contact us. But without further ado, I think it's time to jump into today's presentations. Of course, there are industry versions of this data that we are working on right now. And throughout the presentation, Liz and Karl will speak to some of the findings, some of the intricacies there for each industry. That's something you can message us about too if you're interested in learning more about how to purchase those reports. But Karl, kick us off. This is an exciting moment. It sounds like a lot of people here on the call. This is the first time they're going to be hearing about this year's data. I know from the jump, this year's high growth study just felt different. When we got the results, it just the results were speaking about new themes and new trends that we had not seen in some of the previous years. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where we're at today?
Well, I think it's a reflection of, the trend data. We've been doing this study for quite some time. I think one of the reasons it felt a little different or is really relevant is one, we curated this sample pretty heavily. So we really focus on, just like we advise, quality, number one on the respondents. And as Austin mentioned, we had a really good and deep turnout this year. And also in the prior year, we had asked some questions around, typical, what are the greatest challenges, what's changing? And we adapted this year's study to reflect some of those responses. So for example, you'll see a little bit more this year around, surprise, surprise, AI. How is that being used? What are the challenges versus the opportunities? So I think, as you kind of ripple through, coming out of the pandemic, and now we have, different industry moves overall. You see some of these changes kind of coming through. So, yeah, while some trends are normalizing and there's a better understanding, like some of the catalyst nature of the pandemic driving the fast-growing, high-profit firms to invest more in tracking infrastructure and things, you're seeing that come through into more normative trends now. They're using that to devastating effect, right? But overall, all of these disruptions and changes and moves, the overall growth has cooled a little bit. So it's natural that these firms that have invested so heavily and kind of adapted to how the world works now, you're seeing those changes come through. So it's a really interesting time. There's a heavy pipeline of new and also a lot of trends and, let's say, practical application of things that were put into place 2, 3 years ago. So number one, I alluded to this a little bit, the top challenges that professional services firms are seeing. Number one, and this is a continuation from last year, challenge and also opportunity, incorporating artificial intelligence and automation into their businesses. And thinking about that as, that is a business strategy challenge more even than technology. Technology is progressing at a breakneck pace, but the business strategy is how you implement that. That's challenging. We'll talk a little bit more about this later, but what that means on the outside or how you go to market, there are implications there as well. Right behind that, some of the ripple effect, the unpredictability in the marketplace continues. I think the big difference we'll get into in a little bit is how high growth firms react to that versus low growth. Stating it as a challenge is one thing. How do you meet that challenge? That's an entirely different approach. And here are some of the differences here. Disruption to your business because of AI and automation. This is a new response that's based on some of the questions we asked coming out of last year's study and the year prior. This rose up actually into the top 5, right? Disruption to your business because of AI and automation. So understanding how to map your operations, map your services and your value to this perception of what AI is in the marketplace. We see that consistently throughout the year, both in our primary industry research here, but also in our work with clients across industries, that this is something that's being reflected by their clients, their most important audiences, that their perception of where AI intersects with advisory and human value, it's still being determined. And just as a clarification, when we talk about high growth firms throughout this presentation, we classify that and have classified that consistently as firms that are seeing 20% annual growth over a 3-year evaluation period. Okay. Now, when you look at what is the spread between here, and this has been fairly consistent, that median growth, they're going quite a bit faster than firms that are reporting average or no growth, right? And falling into some of those challenges. One thing that's pretty pronounced this year and probably has some intersect with kind of the practical applications of AI and investment in automation infrastructure, profitability continues to increase. And you see that, the high growth firms are not only high growth scaling in terms of outright revenue, but they are pulling more and a greater ratio of profit than their average and no growth cohorts. So that's an impressive matchup. And I think, speaks to when I was saying when we were just gathering together that look at this study and what we talk about in insights as what's most relevant to your situation. These high growth firms, we're talking about the overall here, but they each have different approaches that make sense for their business and yield that greater growth, greater profitability. So if you think about it in context to what you and your teams are going through, think about, what are the primary advantages that high growth firms have? Where are they emphasizing techniques, approaches, strategies, ways to manage their marketing and business development programs? How are they justifying and building support and funding these teams, and at what ratio to their revenue? And this is one that I think you really look at the internal, like, what is your situation? What trends are these firms really paying attention to? And think about with you and your own focus, where are the biggest opportunities and challenges that your teams are seeing, and what trends are you focused on in relation to these high growth firms?
Thanks, Carl. So here's how we're going to spend the rest of our time together. There are, like Carl mentioned, so many dimensions of high growth firms and what they're doing that we want to talk to you about, which is why it's great if you download the study. Today, we're going to focus on 6 areas where high growth firms are really differentiating from the rest of the pack, and this is where they're experiencing an advantage. So the first area is in their marketing spend. Now, take a look at overall professional services, what marketing spend trends look like. If you take your eyes all the way over to the right, that's this year's data. We're back at pre-pandemic levels of spend. This is for professional services across the board. That kind of makes sense because people didn't really know what they were doing during the pandemic and how they were going to stay alive. And we did see increases in spend at historic levels. So now it's normalized a bit. But let's take a look at what high growth firms are doing that's different from the no growth cohort. They're spending more on marketing by a factor of 2 to 1. And this is not or has not always been the case. In a recent study a couple years ago, we found that high growth firms were actually spending less than their average and no growth counterparts. And that's because the type of marketing that it took to be visible in a sustained manner didn't require the levels of spend that are being required today. Carl talked about AI. I mean, every single day there's a new platform that requires new training and new onboarding. It's a significant spend. Also, different techniques that used to not require or not have a pay to play dynamic now do because of how crowded the marketplace is. So, for multiple reasons, marketing is becoming more expensive. And I think the takeaway here is that high growth firms clearly see marketing as part of the growth engine and driver of growth and profitable growth at that, whereas the no growth firms are still seeing marketing as kind of a cost center. And that's really reflected in this dynamic. Now, when we look at spend, we want to look at where is that spend coming from. So one of the aspects of spend we looked at is in the types of techniques that high growth firms in particular are investing in. So take a look at the results here. The first 2 are around being seen within your target audience from a traditional networking at conferences and events perspective. And the digital twin of that, networking on social media. So, this is an environment where firms absolutely are investing in the type of marketing that gets them directly in front of their target audience. Next is materials that explain what you do and how you do it differently and why you should be selected, followed by materials that express your expertise. This is the thought leadership. So you really see that high growth firms are being very smart about where they're spending. They're spending their dollars on getting in front of audiences in a meaningful way, in a way that directly translates where they have expertise, because that is the fastest way to get selected. Now, I'm sure a lot of you will have questions on marketing spend, and we can talk a lot about that. But one thing we talk to people about quite a bit is how do you talk to your leadership about increasing budget? And there are some specific ways that you can think about doing that. One overarching, and I think this is probably intuitive, but one overarching concept is simply speak the language. Speak the language of the holders of the purses, so to speak. And what we mean by that is number one, anytime you talk about marketing initiatives, make sure you're talking about it in a way that align with overall business objectives. If you're talking, if you have overall aspirations about not just growth, but profitable growth, talk in ways that marketing can align with that profitability, make things more efficient, bring in leads more efficiently, build the pipeline more efficiently. Use data to educate and also validate. So when you do talk about the efficacy of your marketing, make sure you're grounding it in KPIs that really show attribution. So it doesn't feel like to stakeholders you're just talking about some ethereal, abstract thing here. And finally, use those metrics to inform any course corrections you make on your marketing. Maybe you have to dismantle a technique because you've been doing it, it hasn't worked. Maybe you need to reserve that budget to adopt a new one. So metrics are really the way that you can learn to speak, use them to speak the language of those who hold or make the primary budget decisions. But we have found that the way firms are spending on marketing is a primary advantage and vehicle to not just growth, but profitable growth. Now, Karl, that leads us into the next one.
This is going to be a challenging one to keep tight because there is so much to talk to in this space. But let's dive right in. Marketing impact and lead sources are diverse, and boy, are they. Yep. So referrals they have been and will continue to be a dominant source of leads for professional services. One way to think about this chart and the diversity of the different channels and ways that leads find their way to professional services firms is in how they may support those referrals. So if you think about it in terms of validation, credibility, trust, are all of these diverse channels, are we able to measure and understand and set up in a very clear way a reinforcement to what a referral may say about your firm, about your brand? And referrals, not only teams or contacts or referral sources that you may have worked with, but invisible referrers, right? Especially now, as many of us have increased our digital footprint, our brands and teams are learned about through many different avenues. That may be indirect. Referrals may come to you from sources that you and your teams have never interacted with. So all the more important to have an objective understanding of what's most important to these potential prospects, and are we reinforcing the good things that they may have heard through referral sources. The flip side of the coin to think about, what might be some of those killers, right? If a referral and say, gosh, you've got to talk to Liz. She's got everything that you need. And then you go to the Hinge marketing website and you see blah, generic messaging, confusing strategy of how Hinge could help, or the website design is creaky and old. It looks like 1990s front page. That's going to contradict a strong referral that might be coming in your team's direction. Disorganized content structure, inactive channels. So maybe you were really active on YouTube for a week and then it just went quiet for months. These types of things are signals that tell potential referrals that maybe this referral is not as strong or may not connect. So you want to avoid these things. Okay, so now more than ever, we think our methodology is always focused on building trust, credibility, validation, because it is professional services that we're focused on. But here are some real highlights from the study that reinforce that message. High growth firms ranked high activity for subject matter experts, 21% versus 8% of no growth firms. So their most visible experts are active, engaged with the communities they serve, and these teams are supporting them. Here's a really interesting one next, the seller-doer presence. And that's something I would be willing to bet many of you listening today have seller-doers in your organization. Many professional services do. But in the high growth construct, these high growth, high profit firms of all sizes, very large, mid-size, small, but most pronounced in that scaling of mid-size to small firm, there's a much greater proportion of seller doers compared to the no growth cohort. So that means more people are connecting that. They understand what it takes to deliver, so that naturally makes them better sellers, better educators, better experts. Integrated digital presence. We'll talk about this from different perspectives throughout this presentation, but high growth, high profit firms, they rank higher in terms of digital maturity. So they're more fluent in these tools. They are paying way more attention, have been invested in infrastructure to track digital presence and engagement. And that is twofold or manyfold, actually. If you think about building visibility, building engagement, it is the tip of the spear and often the most prominent touch point before a referral gets to you, before a prospect gets to you, even before potential recruits get to you. And it is also business intelligence. It's not a one-way street, it's two-way, many ways. You can understand your audience through these tools as a form of research. And last but not least, third-party validation. Promoting original content was a hallmark for high growth firms. And in today's age of kind of the sea of beige and AI fast enabled, quick kind of empty calorie content, AI and humans both favor unique, credible resources. So original research is a very strong way to differentiate from more generic competitors when it comes to a thought space. The impact, because of this very diverse approach that we looked at in that ring chart, is shared across many different channels. What I'd like to point out here, and as you look through this and download the report and kind of match this against where you may be seeing the most impact from the different channels you're supporting, if you look at this set as a whole, you'll see the interweaving of traditional and digital methods. Now, in a lot of cases, when you dive deeper into this data or through our experience working with these types of firms, you begin to understand that it's not just the networking at conferences, trade shows, and events. It's also setting up the infrastructure to measure engagement at the event, the proper preparation, strategy on deck, and then post follow-up to the event and measuring of opportunities that really makes the difference. Did you present something different? Did you have the correct resourcing for that? Are you promoting interconnected thought leadership leading up to an event? So I would recommend looking at this set as a whole for impact and thinking about that interplay between these different techniques. And the big takeaway is that high growth firms are leaning into this diversity. And with that, they've invested in the infrastructure to better understand what's working and what's not.
Yeah, well said, Carl. I want to give a quick shout out to Marty, Shambi, and some others who have submitted some questions here. We've got a lot of content to get through, so we're going to plow ahead and save questions till the end. But please, everybody, as we continue and you see more content on the screen, feel free to jump in with your questions in here. We'll answer them at the end of the presentation today, or once afterwards, we'll reach out to you and make sure you get an answer to your question. Liz, we got insight number 3 here. Talk to us about what we're seeing from the high growth study in this trend.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of talked about the undercurrents of today's marketplace, which is about relationships and trust. And um, there has not been a time where those two things together are converging to be so critical to how firms drive pipeline, specifically as digital has come to the fore. So we're kind of going back to the way it used to be in a way. Digital is not gone, it's very much part of it. But relationships and trust are what drives growth and profitable growth. So Carl, you mentioned earlier the seller doer model. Firms today, you really develop great relationships as you are carrying out business development and having conversations with prospective clients. And high growth firms know that those same people who are active in the business development also have a very productive role to play in the delivery of whatever it was they sold. And so that's why the seller doer model has always been alive and well in professional services. It continues to be, and high growth firms are really leveraging this. You can just see the differences. And Carl, you were making that point. One of the reasons they do that, if we go to the next slide, is because it puts their experts at the center. Just look at the top priorities for 2026 by high growth firms. Number 2, almost tied for number 1, developing thought leaders. Why? Because thought leaders provide that voice of authentic, can't fake it expertise. That's what a thought leader is. So it makes sense in an environment where relationships are going to drive referrals and trust is going to drive referrals, which then leads to new business. Thought leaders have to be front and center, and it makes perfect sense that this is a top priority. Now, high growth firms are also doing something really important. They're not just saying, hey, we need to make our experts visible, go do it. They're supplying them with critical resources to make sure that experts are efficient in their rise to visibility. So these are, we took a look at this in this year's study. Where are high growth firms in particular supporting their experts? What could be more important than a strategy in and of itself? A lot of times we talk with experts and they'll have multiple books. They're very comfortable on the stage, but they have no idea where it's all headed. There's no central strategy that is harnessing all of that goodness that they bring to the table. So that is high growth firms understand that, and that is the top tool, if you will, that they're supplying their firms with or their experts with. And the next are very tactical. And I like what you said earlier, Carl. Use these findings as guidelines that you'll use to figure out what makes sense for your firm and your circumstance. But the headline here is that outside of the strategy, there are specific, very tactical, concrete things you can arm your experts with so that at the end of the day, they feel like they're operating in a well-oiled machine. Now, I want to take you through a couple places where we see firms regularly get hung up here, some things to avoid, if you will. One is, we see this all the time. Carl, Austin, you guys hear this with people you talk to, but don't, sit your experts at a table and say, hey, Austin, I know you love talking about X, so you take Thursdays, and Carl, you love talking about Y, you're going to take Mondays. Go do it. That's the worst thing you can do because uh, neither Carl nor Austin is connected. They don't know what the other is doing. They don't know how to cross promote. But more importantly, they don't know if what they are writing about ties to the firm's overall objective. So that's why a solid content strategy that is three things: relevant to what your audience cares about, it's differentiated from what the competition is already saying, and it's aligned with your company objectives. That's a solid content strategy. Second, every expert comes to the table with certain skills. Not all experts are prolific speakers and writers all at the same time. So just make sure that you're recognizing that each expert might be more proficient in one skill set than another, and then arm yourself with coaches, get them trained. In some cases, maybe they're only going to pursue one avenue. Maybe they're just going to be the writers, and you got somebody else to be a speaker. But ideally, your visible experts will be able to be proficient so that they can network, they can write, and they can get on the stage comfortably. And they're going to need support doing that. Third, we saw in earlier slides how much of a pivot firms are taking to in-person events, networking, but they're not just sending their people to a booth. What they're doing is making sure their experts are armed with contacts they have connected with ahead of the event. Maybe they write a white paper or a lengthy piece of content, and your firm gets behind them and really promotes that prior to the event, so that by the time this expert or group of experts goes to this event, they're sought out. People have seen this content. So it's not just going to a booth, it's being walking the floor, being sought out, shaking hands, or even speaking from an expert-led perspective. And finally, we talked about the importance of metrics earlier. You want to make sure that your experts, who may very well be the sellers and the doers, who may very well sit front and center of the executive team, who's also tasked with growing your firm, you want to make sure that they know to what end they are doing things. Attribution metrics are everything when it comes to showing experts, are they moving the needle? Where are they moving the needle? By what order of magnitude are they moving the needle? And firms will report on different metrics depending on their business model, how early or mature they are in their ascent to visibility. But the key here is to get those metrics in front of experts, because otherwise these busy people do not sustain momentum around all the things that are required of them to be visible. So high growth firms support their visible experts in droves, major, major focus. Now let's turn to the other three areas. Karl, this is one that you need to take because you have been a leader even within Hinge, and speaking to our own clients around how to leverage AI. So let's talk about this and what high growth firms are doing here.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. I mean, this is an area where there's a lot of excitement and also a lot of challenge. There's a lot to navigate. And, I was just thinking about this, Liz, as you were talking about the seller doers. In some way, AI and this tool set, they're almost like another kind of persona, right? It's a different kind of co-worker, seller doer tool set that's available here. And as you'll see in the executive summary, when you pull that down, and then even in more detail in the industry studies, this is pretty universal. High growth firms, 90+% are using AI. However, most are stuck in administrative mode. This is the easy first step, note-taking, drafting, and they are primarily large language models now. So you see that practical adoption really hooking in. but that means there are great opportunities in using some of the more advanced features or how to integrate that into your business strategy and go-to-market strategy. The competitive gap here, top performers are shifting AI usage more towards market research and data analysis. This is something that, I mean, it is fascinating to watch how the different use cases are expanding across some of these high growth, high profit firms. Hinge, I think from our perspective, we've been working with, we're a Google shop. We've been working with Gemini before it was called Gemini. And it's frankly the first time that I've had a dedicated team at Google for many, many years, because there is a lot of figuring out to do and understanding what are the most practical applications. How can these tools really be leveraged as a competitive advantage and not, just a shiny thing that goes by the wayside when it doesn't perform? How can they be systematically integrated into your strategies, right? High growth firms are 4 times more likely to be digitally intelligent. And that's just talking about their maturity, right? How are they integrating and understanding data between different departments across different use cases, eliminating some of those silos? That's a huge opportunity, especially when you talk about AI and automation. Doing it in a safe and really practical way. It's easier to say than to do. That's a separate webinar to get into, but there's a lot of focus there. AEO and GEO, you will see a lot out there right now, and fast growing, high profit firms. I wouldn't say that they're throwing money in this direction, but they are definitely focused here. And we ourselves, we have seen, benefited, been right in the middle of some of the shifts between what was traditional SEO and the emergence of AEO, which is answer engine optimization, and GEO, generative engine optimization. GEO is probably what you'll hear the most about, but really that's how these platforms are being used as a search method. It's part of the transition from a Google ranking shaped internet to an AI agent shaped internet, where you're basically sending a robot out to bring back the correct answer for your question or do secondary research for you. So thinking about how you connect that, that's really the killer app. Liz, you want to go through some of the tools here? This is an interesting slide.
I do think this is interesting. One of the dynamics of leveraging AI we looked at is the specific ways high growth firms are doing that. So before I get into some of this, everyone take their eyes to the bottom of the chart. 7%. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny amount who said we don't currently use AI tools. I think that's really telling because there are a lot of firms out there who are frankly just feeling swallowed up by the possibilities that AI can promise. And really, there's rarer is a firm we come across who isn't dabbling in it in some way, shape, or form. But high growth firms, I think there's some instruction here that we can use. Take your eyes to the very top. The number one way high growth firms are leveraging AI is in content creation. What that does not mean is they're using AI to create content from scratch. That just contributes to junk and fluff, and it dismantles all the trust that you are trying to build in the marketplace. That is not what high growth firms are doing. What they are doing is using AI to, number one, craft outlines. So this is so perfect for an expert. If you think about one of the ways you can really help experts get a lot of thoughtfully written, well-researched content out there is to arm them with a writer who can really listen, interview these experts, synthesize their thoughts, and get it out there. Well, AI tools can be helpful in that realm as well, where an expert just gets their thoughts out there, their AI platform, whatever they end up using, can synthesize those thoughts and help them see ways that maybe aren't obvious to them on what the angle should be. So they're using AI to enhance authentic thoughtful thought leadership, not create it. So that's number one. The other ways they're using it are around being smarter on where things are performing, where they're not. You see data analysis and reporting, workflow automation. I'm going from top to bottom, content optimization. But this is a way that AI is helping firms be more intelligent about the types of things they do. Competitor research, another one. So they're using it to augment the intel and bring the intel faster, more efficiently. So I think this is going to be something that we're going to see really change over time, Karl. I think the ways we're leveraging AI today are going to be different from the way we use it tomorrow. But for now, this can be uh, considered a guideline, if you will, for where firms who are seeing profitable growth and incorporating AI into that equation, how they're using it.
Yeah. Potential use cases and think about, be skeptical. I think that's my mantra now. Be skeptical. Don't assume what you've assumed even a year ago because it changes week to week, month to month. To that point, I'm not going to linger on this slide, but high growth firms rank as more proficient in capturing and therefore have more confidence in the business development metrics that they capture. I spoke earlier about how these firms have been using to devastating effect the infrastructure and training and strategies that they put in place 2 or 3 years ago. This is a piece to tee up this next slide here that talks about, what marketing and business development metrics are being tracked the most, and what are the differences by high growth and no growth. I'm going to skip to the bottom here because this is one that is fairly telling. Leads by source. Well, that's good. We should understand the source. This is where we were, maybe a decade ago for no growth firms. They're heavily indexed there. Of course, we want to know our source. I think the place when you start to look up at the top of this chart or see where high growth firms are indexing higher, social media, website analytics, advertising, which is still an area that's quite underdeveloped for professional services, just at scale compared to B2B or B2C. But they are focusing more on these analytics in key areas and really across the spectrum of different techniques so that they understand attribution and touch points and how they may relate to one another. So I think this is a really important piece, and it's not saying, again, specifically, focus on social media analytics. This is the be all end all. But thinking about your program and where you're focused on, I think the key takeaway here is cast the net, be diverse in your analytics, and look for all of the opportunities to bring intelligence in and understand what's working, what's not, and what techniques and channels are reinforcing one another. Okay. Now this next area, this is something that you would see in analytics, and we've talked about for quite some time over the past few years. Mergers and acquisitions are still a significant factor for high growth firms. We flip to the next slide here. The percentage of firms that reported this year, that were merged or acquired with another firm in 2025, it's actually down slightly overall. It's down a little bit. That is not the same in all of the industries. Some industries progressed at the same clip or more, some tailed down less, but overall it cooled a little bit. But the second chart is telling. And Liz, yeah, you're going to show us some good stuff in a second here, but this is saying that the percentage of revenue attributed to inorganic growth methods is vastly greater for high growth firms than for no growth firms. So more of their growth is attributed to inorganic methods. So mergers, acquisition, those types of things.
Yeah, and Karl, as you and I know, and so many folks on today's webinar know, M&A can be a driver or inhibitor of growth. So we looked at To the point that you just made about high growth firms leveraging it so successfully, there were four primary things that high growth firms are really focusing on as they invest in M&A as a vehicle to growth. And one is on that digital maturity you mentioned. They're 4x greater, 4x times more digitally mature than the no growth counterparts. And so that systematic thinking is critical as you're folding in additional brands to the equation. And speaking of folding in, the second thing is integrating operations, finance, sales, marketing, BD, and importantly, the overall firm culture. That is a showstopper, a growth stopper. When those things aren't integrated and you're just stumbling over each other constantly as opposed to letting it all flow. Experts. As you acquire more brands, you're bringing more experts into the fold, and they want to know that they're joining an entity that is going to support their ascent to visibility. So those slides that we talked earlier really tie to this point where high growth firms, they know how important that is, and they're making it a primary investment for their experts to retain that top talent. And finally, that the M&A has to balance the reputation that is visible externally with the same experience internally, because otherwise, like we say, you're helping that top talent that we talked about above just find their new professional home. So that the external has to mirror the internal so that the authenticity is there, which then engenders the trust that we're talking about. Now, Karl, we're rounding out this discussion today with the final one around maybe one of the most important.
I mean, this is a part where we tie it all together before we hopefully have a few minutes for Q&A. But a lot of the things we've talked about, heard Liz talk about it, I've alluded to it in places around how you are basically answering the questions that are posed by your most important audiences, whether that's prospective business, potential recruits, all of the things that would drive that connection to the heavily relationship-based business that we're in. How do we get to the right place of understanding? And
Oh,
go ahead, Liz.
well, I was just going to say, since the earliest days of our research, we have found that high growth firms are much more likely to be investing in this type of research. They're not just building marketing strategies based on what the very smart people who have grown that company think they should do. No, they're studying the behavior of their target audience so that everything they do from a marketing perspective ties to that behavior. When we first started doing this, they were 2x times more likely than their no growth peers to do that. We know this has been a primary way that high growth firms have differentiated and achieved their growth.
So you're saying it's not the loudest voice in a room? I've been working on my lung capacity my whole career. My gosh. So here's a nice Venn diagram that I think hopefully ties together a lot of the topics that we've been talking about today. In Hinge's perspective, qualitative research, specifically in professional services, is one of the best ways to build a foundation for an integrated strategy across these different channels. The reason why is, let's assume you're working with Hinge. It's not Hinge's voice that you care about. We help to bring everything together, advise, synthesize, have the strategy and experience. But the voice, the lung capacity that's most important is your audience, the audience that you're speaking to. And the best way to get a direct bead on that is through qualitative research. And this is something where there is an art and a science to it that's easier to talk about than to execute well. But objective, unbiased research, getting unbiased perspective from the audiences that matter to your business the most this is the way that you do it. And being able to organize that into segments, prioritize it according to your business goals. So different practice area, market, service alignment, all of those things into actionable, practical insights forms the foundation for what you can then execute in terms of things like GEO and AEO, analysis, monitoring, optimization, strategy to appear in selection committees when they're talking to ChatGPT, or SEO analysis, monitoring, and strategy, where you are building the content that humans and AI are searching for to answer the questions that are keeping them up at night. And those questions, you're going to hear that directly through the research, forms a foundation, and then you can adjust, refine, categorize, prioritize. PR, media research, monitoring, and placement, that's an area that we actually see as increasing, where maybe some of the days of easy organic visibility are on the decline. Things like earned media, understanding what sentiments are being expressed about your brand among potential new business prospects, in media, even on social media platforms, understanding where that earned media is, where it lives, what trust and credibility signals it's sending to your audiences, also informed by research. And last but not least, paid advertising. This piece here is one where I alluded to before, professional services. We don't really use these platforms at the scale that delivers heavy impact, but it's starting. And I would say in social media and the types of publications or places where our audiences spend the most time and still engage with, those are the places to start building and testing results in that lane. Again, how do you prioritize? Understand directly from the audiences. So these pieces all work together. That objective understanding is the key. That diversity of insight, right? 46% conduct competitive research, 45% conduct marketplace and client satisfaction research to spot gaps that competitors miss, and understand here's where, if we line up what we do differently in our culture, in our go-to-market, in our service offering, where will we be most impactful and can dominate a conversation across these different channels. I saw somewhere in the questions, when we're talking about competitive research and market research, it's understanding the space that you're going to market in, whether that's demand, sizing, understanding the competitive set and how it may be changing. We talked about M&A. There are competitors coming in and out of backyards every week, it seems now. So keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on is crucial. I talked a little bit about that objective bias. That just means it's the opposite of the loudest voice in the room. It's the voice that matters. It's the voices that matter. Don't guess why. Don't follow the internal perspective. Understanding the internal perspective in a professional services forum is important so that you understand what gaps you need to close with your team, but really it's the voice of your audiences that's most important. So all of that adds up to a 2 times or greater advantage through this type of objective understanding that drives relevance. All these techniques that you do, it's quality, relevance, credibility that matters over checking the box or just doing these activities or approaching these channels with quantity. In today's kind of marketing landscape, you can just look around and see the quantity of things. The question I hope you ask yourselves is, are we showing up in the right way to the people we actually care about?
Well, Karl, Liz, that was a lot to get through in under an hour. Hand clap for you guys. You did it. Wonderful presentation. And thanks to everyone who joined today. Behind this research, there were 495 firms that participated in the high growth study to help us bring these insights to you today. Those 495 people are about to get this industry study for their industry. So all the data that you saw today, but segmented just for their industry, they're about to get those research reports for free as a thank you for participating in the study. For everyone else, if you're interested in one of those industry studies, you can go to our website and go to hingemarketing.com/industry studies, and you can learn about pre-ordering or purchasing one of those reports. They'll be coming out here and will all be out by the end of February. Um, we also got another webinar coming up. Karl mentioned this kind of theme here of the AEO, GEO. We know a lot of our audience is really interested in what's going on in this space. So on February 18th, we are running a webinar called From Traffic to Trust. And it's going to be all about how this world of AEO and GEO is shaping the new way that your firm is being discovered online. So we hope I put the registration link in a chat there and hope you can join us. But for those of you, like I said, that if you're unfamiliar with Hinge, we are a marketing agency that specifically does that qualitative research for our clients, build marketing strategies. If those are services that your firm needs interest in, there's a survey at the end of today's webinar. You can just check the box. Yeah, I want to talk to somebody, and we'll reach out to you. With that being said, let's jump into the great questions we had. And for those who can hang on a little bit longer with us, Karl, Liz, and I will stay on a little bit past the top of the hour to answer some of these questions because there were a lot of really good ones, and I want to make sure we answer some of those for those of you who can stay and for those of you watching the recording. Liz, I'll pose the first question to you. You actually just answered it, but I think it would be good for the whole group to hear. This was from David, who asked about the seller doers that you were talking about, and what our data showed was that more seller doers are active in those high growth firms. But does that raise a problem, which David describes as the AB team problem, which is you pitch with your A team, but then you deliver with your B team? I'm just curious how you responded to David's
Yeah, I
question.
mean, it was such a great question. And I mean, I think it's always going to be a dynamic within professional services because professional services is a very specific marketplace where the bar is incredibly high, expectations for delivery are incredibly high. And all of us in professional services are feeling a lot of heat because of the dynamics of the marketplace. So they the desire, the strong desire by clients is they get the A team. It's not always possible. And what I was saying to David is the best way, and this is not a game the system way, this is an authentic way. The best way to convince clients they're not getting the B team, if those team members aren't on the front lines of BD, is to build them as visible experts. Allow these folks to author content, support them in authoring content, support their visibility in social channels, which in let's be real in professional services is going to be LinkedIn. Support their ascent to visibility so that when they walk in the room, they already command a different level of credibility and they engender a different level of trust than if they're just invisible players. They may be very qualified, but if your clients have never seen them before, they just don't have that credibility. And they may be A team players and you know them to be A team, but the client will feel that they're lesser than that. So I support those people, make them visible experts, and you're not going to have this issue.
Great answer, Liz. All right, Karl, this question came from Andrew. How is the growth of private equity acquisitions of professional services firms impacted professional services marketing? To what degree is that interfering with the focus on relationships and trust, sacrificed in the interest of fast turnaround sales?
That's a great question. And I want to unpack that a little bit because I'm not going to whistle the theme. It could be good, bad, and the ugly, right? In the best cases, that private equity investment and impact on professional services is a real win because that is the funding and focus and some outside perspective on strategies, infrastructure that you need to do a lot of the things that we talked about, measuring attribution over time and building in these different things, or even supporting paid advertising. That is, frankly, a real advantage in places and is received in other areas as, oh my gosh, where did these where did these folks come from? Sometimes private equity is behind that. And, with teams, if that's part of the consolidation strategy or that portfolio growing where, there's good cultural alignment, there's the infrastructure and cultures of performance and understanding what's working and what's not working. And as Liz was talking about, that understanding and nurturing and building the value of experts, of advisors, not focusing on just the fast turn commodities. That's a winning combination. And we've seen plenty of that. On the other side, if teams are not ready to integrate, they don't have the data infrastructure, or the culture does not believe in that kind of approach, the investment, I mean, it can wash away, right? If there's not the cultural alignment, private equity may see something clearly and want something, but experts are not there or don't have the infrastructure or, buy in to try something different, then you're at an impasse. And sometimes that investment in equity that from the private equity's perspective, they've acquired, it washes away quickly. And from the expert side, they're being pressed to do things that they're not comfortable with. That's maybe the ugly side. Somewhere in between there are things to iron out. There's opportunities and challenges, always in a merger and acquisition activity. And Liz, you probably have a lot of great perspectives on this in other areas too, but it's, there is a bit of, we know who we were before, who are we now as a brand, as an organization, as a culture. And those things, it doesn't change or just smooth out and fix itself overnight. There is a practical approach to that. I mean, that's often full transparency. Hinge is brought in a lot of these situations, but we've seen great results from that. And sometimes it's that objective understanding. That's the level set. Everybody can see eye to eye when we're listening to our most important audiences and organizing around that versus what may have been our corporate structure before, what it's evolving to now, where our financing comes from. At the core of it, it's as simple as that. Focus on your clients and organize around what's relevant to them. How objectively can you understand that? Great question.
Excellent stuff.
Great question.
Yeah, great question. Great question. Liz, we had a great question, another great one from a close friend of Hinge, Shambi Eubanks, who is asking, do we have a feel for the amount that people are spending on networking events versus exhibiting or sponsoring events?
That's a great question. So our data doesn't get into that layer of specificity. However, we know from just the um, multiple dozens and dozens of firms we already work with and just the general community out there that what they aren't doing is investing in expensive events and flying big teams out just to have a booth. Yeah, that's still happening, but it's not where firms are getting leverage. What they are doing is making sure that the priority is on getting in front of people, whether it's on the physical stage or whether it's working the room or whether it's a fireside chat or a lunch and learn or some kind of sponsored event during the whole broader event. And then the booth is kind of secondary. So sure, we still see instances of doing both, but the priority is on a meaningful way to interact with the audience who's at these events.
I totally agree. One thing that came to my mind is that we do another piece of body of research with the Association for Accounting Marketing. I know it's accounting focused, but it does get into those raw budget numbers. So Shambi, I'll follow up with you there on kind of if there's anything I can glean on that answer for you. Karl, why don't we do one more here? This was from Matt Wilkinson. He's saying that he agrees that one of the best uses of AI in marketing is market research, and that they have used standard tools like Gemini Deep Research, but are there any dedicated research tools that we rate?
My gosh, that's a great question. I wish I had a very clear answer for you, but it's unfortunately a bit complicated. I would say overall, there are a lot of valuable tools. And I mean, for data collection, full transparency, we work with Qualtrics, SAP, a lot of great tool sets and integration capabilities there. But what we have found, if I were to offer insight into that as you're evaluating research tools, is that, it is so crucial to factor in the human analyst and, the business perspectives into any type of AI enhanced workflow, because this kind of technology can give you very confident and good sounding responses, and it needs human handlers. That's what we've seen. And actually, you know, I'll give in the Hinge Kitchen, our methodology, there's multiple passes, right? You can think of it as man and machine working together, machine helping to process some of the raw data sets. But we have found a very significant difference in how we intersect and different passes with the human experience analysts, even in the interviewing techniques, all of that. So the tool set in a lot of ways is secondary to the design of your research workflow and how you even are designing your research infrastructure. What methods and tool sets are you using for data collection? And I think that's, survey fatigue is for real. So I think, as you continue to explore these tool sets and research, I think the landscape is shifting into a more diverse set of what is termed as research and how you analyze those different data sets. We touched on it a little bit today with the different analytics and more integrated data, but in our minds, those go in between primary, secondary research. All of those data sets, the more the more ability you have to integrate these flows with the right humans in the loop, that's one of the greatest kind of opportunities, and I mean, frankly, one of the places we're really excited about the growth of this technology. The accuracy is night and day from, say, 5 years ago. So
Yeah.
that kind of democratization of that tool set is huge, but like so many things, the experience and team that is working alongside makes all the difference in the output.
Excellent. Well, we still have 60 participants in the room, so I just found a little bit more room in my heart to allow for one more question. Liz, this question comes from Justin. I think it's one that broadly could be applicable to most people on the call here. How do you deal with players who don't want to help sell, but they are in a position that they should be doing so? Sort of
Yeah,
like a
I saw
broad
that.
leadership question.
Yeah, I saw that question. I was going to answer it if you didn't let me answer it here. So this is great. So yeah, this can be an issue. On the one side, I mean, this is something that we tell our own team at Hinge, but literally everybody has a role, no matter what hat you wear within a company. You all have a role in selling, because you are the brand advocate. So if a person is kind of reluctant to be on the front lines, but they're well poised to do it, I guess one thing I would look at is, do they need some training? There's lots and lots of great training out there. There might just be something that is holding them back that training could help rectify. On the other hand, talk to them and see what is the impediment. Sometimes we work with similar executives, and we find that they just don't feel that they're armed with the right kinds of tools to do the pitching that they feel is a pitch that would engender the trust and establish the rapport and all of that. So that's very eye-opening. A lot of times we can have blind spots to tools that we're missing. So maybe you can learn from this person about what the impediments are and then try to address them for that way. But it's everyone has a role to play in selling, and I don't know what the dynamics would be at this company where a person is in the position but reluctant to do so. So I just think if they're a valued player, it's worth doing an introspective look and see if it's maybe training or fortification of tools or something in between.
Excellent. Well, I'll give a shout out to some others in here: Marty, Daniel, Brian, Gray, David, Jennifer. There's a lot of people that asked some great questions, but we will respond to you via email sometime today, tomorrow, next 24 hours. Give us a minute, but we will get back to you. And we hope that everyone connects with us on LinkedIn and send us a message if you got any more questions. Really appreciate your attention and participation in today's webinar. This is always a super exciting part of the year for us as we get to come and roll out the high growth study data for the year. We will continue to be doing webinars this year. Liz and Carl will continue to be publishing articles, newsletters. We have a podcast where we talk about this data. So there's a lot of ways that you can engage with Hinge and continue to learn more about how we're thinking about professional services marketing to keep you educated and ahead of the curve. And like I said, reach out to us if you are interested in learning more about our services. We're easy to find. hingemarketing.com. You'll see everything there. Thanks everybody for your time, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.